My name is Max. I'm the CEO and founder of Pinboard Consulting. We're a dedicated graphs and networks system integrator. We do everything from half-day workshops to multi-year, graph product build implementations and everything in between. And Ricky, give us 10 seconds on you and Ultipa.
My name's Ricky Sung. I'm the founder and CEO of Ultipa. So essentially, we are a graph database company, and I think we invented the category which we're calling real-time graph database and also XAI, explainable and augmented intelligence. All right, Max, let's get started.
Fantastic. So yeah, I think we wanted this chat to be like a roundup of 2025 in graph. It's been an amazing year for graph. We've seen a huge explosion of graph RAG adoption. I've had multiple clients do implementations. I know you've got some as well, but yeah, how do you see 2025 graph and AI? What do you see as the main trends for the last year?
We all know GQL was officially released finally in late 2024. The industrial customers, they felt pretty easy to accept graph technology than before. Clearly, there's an international standard, and that's going to be a major push. On the other hand, we do see, the uprising of AI, and I mean this wave of AI. We're seeing all kinds of major development, but under the hood, not exactly on the surface, we do see those AI companies. They are start adopting graph technology in a deeper and broader way. Then we're going to expand on that. But what I'm seeing is that we're still seeing a lot of potentials, and we're seeing that graph being used in a deeper, much deeper way. So sooner or later, we're going to see the entire industry going to be aligned, in a certain way, and graph potentially is part of it.
Yeah, I definitely see that as well. With our clients, the way they're using graph now is graph RAG. Helping stop their chatbots from hallucinating, contextualize things, work with company ontologies. But yeah, I think there are levels below that. So lots of the vendors are now talking about agentic memory. There's a lot of potential in terms of scheduling for the agents. The emergence of NADN has been fantastic for adoption. It's just made adoption so much easier. And yeah, people are really using it. Like, I don't think it's always hitting the press because clients and customers are kind of staying quiet about how much they're doing and how, the benefits they're using. But yeah, we're literally on our third graph RAG client already just in 2025 of a major implementation. So yeah, it's definitely happening. It's definitely real. What are you seeing from Ultipa and your Ultipa clients?
I actually want to answer a question with a question. Why we need yet another database, graph database, or why eventually we need graph technologies? What do you think about this?
Yeah, I'm actually seeing it much more from the business. So I think IT just kind of get it. They get that vector RAG is not enough on its own. And I think they've tried to have some of those conversations maybe late 2024, early 2025. But now the kind of general awareness has really improved. And so when you talk to the business people about why you need the graph RAG, you can have much better conversations now. I think they will actually see, okay, we're really trying to connect data. We're also trying to connect concepts. Our client and customer, the same thing or different things. Well, it depends on the context. In some context, client might be customer. In some context, client might not be. What about supplier? Are suppliers always just business partners, or sometimes are suppliers customers? And so that semantic and ontology can be really hard to do just with like a vector cosine similarity, right? Whereas if you can give your model context, if you can give it a good graph schema, you can let it interpret your business metadata, then you can really start to get much, much better outcomes. And that's what the business want, right? They just want better outcomes, fewer hallucinations, more accurate answers. That's really what I'm seeing.
What are the most painful things that they desire graph to solve, but also the challenges when they adopt graph technologies? Like, from my opinion, graph data modeling, that's a number one hurdle, like during the life cycle of adopting graph technologies. From your perspective, what do you think?
Yeah, in terms of what the business want, it's what the business have always wanted. It's what they've wanted since the 70s, since the 80s, since the 90s, since 2000, which is, can I just ask questions of my data, right? Yeah. That's all they've ever wanted to do. And initially, the answer was, you can ask questions with SQL. And so the business would kind of learn a bit of SQL, maybe. They would interact with their data. The main way that most businesses would ever touch their data was spreadsheets. Spreadsheets were the killer app of the 20th century, right?
Totally.
Oracle was basically just spreadsheets on steroids, right?
Yeah.
Originally, Oracle's evolved beyond that now, but that was how people would interact with the data and ask questions. And then they'd maybe learn about pivots, and pivots are effectively a way of trying to get high dimensional information about what your data is doing. And then along came these sort of amazing database solutions. But as the data volumes grew and the complexity grew, you basically run out of runway in SQL, and you run out of runway in second normal form, and you run out of runway in tables, and you run out of runway in recursive joins. But the business still wanted to ask the questions. And then when IT came back saying, well, that's going to be, n factorial, and n is a million, you can't do a million factorial, it doesn't work. The business were like, well, but come on, answer my business question. I just want to know, in this country for these suppliers with these products, what are the implications of this change? And you just couldn't do it in joins, right? You're trying to join a table with 1 million rows to a table with 100 million rows to a table with 150 million rows, and suddenly the inner joins would just run out of runway and it couldn't execute. So yeah, I think this is where now what you need to deal with the volumes and deal with the complexities is graph, right? And so the emergence of GQL, as you mentioned, is really helping people be able to start asking those questions again, the high dimensional questions, the interrelated questions with match statements. So I think where people used to have to be able to understand a select statement and a where clause to interpret their data, to understand their data, to interrogate their data, now they're going to have to add match. And the GQL committee, the match statement is really intuitive. Once you actually get your head around what a node type is and what an edge type is and how they relate to each other, those match statements are going to be really powerful for getting those high dimensional insights.
When we were trying to be GQL compliant as much as possible, because you do know originally our database supports UQL, which is a proprietary, Ultipa query language. It's not as sophisticated as GQL, but it's so much faster. It has a lot of embedded functions, very convenient, but it's not an international standard, just like Cypher. It's not a standard. What the thing is, we realized that GQL from the specification purpose, not exactly on the implementation front end, I actually think there are a lot of improvements potentially can be added to GQL in the future revisions. What do you think about that? I mean, it's not perfect today.
Yeah. Completely agree. And the thing is, the GQL committee agrees as well. Like I'm on the Lex subcommittee working on the GQL schema specification. So adding in really powerful things like constraints, cardinality constraints, type constraints will help. But also in terms of the richness, like I think they had to make a lot of sacrifices in terms of scope to be able to get the first version of GQL out there. And so, yeah, absolutely, there are things that GQL can improve, and it's very active, right? The GQL committee is very active. The next version of GQL is being discussed. The Lex subgroup is very active. Alistair Green is doing an amazing job of keeping the momentum going there. So yeah, absolutely, GQL can be improved. But even now, it's already useful. And particularly the interoperability with SQL, the familiarity of some of the syntax, the capabilities, and the adoption is just crazy. Like it's now very, very widely used, I think.
Yeah, that's going to accelerate exponentially.
Yeah. I mean, one of the nice things about SQL and GQL and some of the other querying languages is they're declarative, right? So behind the scenes, you can build very, very powerful query engines, which can interpret it and go, yeah, I know what you want to do, but don't do it like that. And then turn it into much, much more efficient query plans, maybe with columnar, maybe with, row-based, maybe with decomposition, maybe turning things into, different, even translating into other languages to then go and do things. So yeah, I think, it's something where the vendors can definitely do a lot of work to make what might be a slightly inefficient GQL query into a
Right.
very efficient query plan, and then return the results, right?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that's the trick. That's the trick we
Yeah,
all play.
of course. Yeah.
Cool. What do you think about the future of the graph technology, graph product, and graph ecosystem?
Yeah, awesome question. It's something that I get asked a lot. We're a consultancy. People come to us to ask about the future. We also get asked by the hyperscalers sometimes. The hyperscalers themselves, they don't always know everything. They can kind of seem like they do, but they come to me and they want to check out. We kind of think this might be happening. What do you think? So they do ask. I see the future of graph as being graph and relational working incredibly closely together. One
Totally.
thing that I've definitely found in our journey is unless there's a really compelling reason, people don't want to move their data or copy their data. If their data is sitting in S3, they want to leave it in S3. If it's sitting in some database tables, they want to leave it in the database tables. If it's sitting in BigQuery, they want to leave it in BigQuery, right?
Yeah.
One of the nice things about Ultipa, Neo4j, TigerGraph is that the schema definition, they kind of hide a lot of stuff away, right? Creating foreign keys, creating edge tables, all those relationship indexing. The users don't need to touch that. Whereas with a lot of these graph on relational solutions at the moment, the users still have to do a lot of the mapping of that's a node type, that's an edge type. I got to have that edge type table. I got to index this like this. It's still very nitty gritty. So even though I think it is the future long term for where graph is really going to grow is in that space, graph on Databricks, fantastic, right? So much stuff was on Databricks, graph on S3, graph on BigQuery, right? I see that as a huge growth for graph. In terms of the graph databases, though, the graph databases will always have the edge in terms of performance and latency, right? When you have a certain use case where you need that real-time speed and that real-time latency and that super massive analytics capability at speed, the graph databases will always have a place.
I want to actually disclose something, like provide more information. Right now, we're calling that dummy schema, or we really support schema-free and schematic on the other hand. So both. It's the best of both worlds. We wanted maximum flexibility. Also, we want to be, enterprise production quality. Normally, people prefer, especially from the SQL world, they prefer schematic kind of design. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, I think it's a great offering. Personally, I love schemas. That's how.
Me too.
Yeah. That's how our clients like to work. We very, very rarely seem to get asked for, those kind of schemaless or flex schema style engagements. All of our engagements so far, literally 100% of Pinboard engagements have been defined schema. But I know that there's a sub portion of the industry that really likes schemaless for good reasons. So yeah, great that you guys now support that. That's really good.
Perfect.
Yeah. The other thing that I've seen more of in 2025 than I think in previous years is products that are graph at their absolute core. So the big news story was Wiz, right? Attack path analytics, cybersecurity went from 0 to 35 billion in 5 years. Extraordinary, and all based on graph. Graph engine, graph tool. I believe it's Neptune under the hood, but the main thing for our industry is graph as the engine. And this is really starting to pick up a lot. If you look in the supply chain space, supply chain has historically been very, very strong adopters of graph approach for risk, resilience, route analytics, supplier analytics, etc. Blue Yonder. So Blue Yonder, as part of their Snowflake integration, are also integrating with RHEL AI, another sort of graph or graphy approach. SAP have come out. They've got their RDF ontology. You've got Chainalysis and companies like that. You've got Sayari. So all these, large product style companies where they might not necessarily emphasize that graph is the engine, but within the industry, we know that it is. And they're dominating their industries, right? These
And
graph engine things. Of course.
Palantir.
Yeah. How could you not mention
Consulting
Palantir?
company.
Yeah.
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 Cool.
So yeah,
cool.
these.
So Yeah, I mean, Max, this is great conversation. I know this is still very early to say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, but I think
Mm.
this video is produced for that purpose.
Yep. Good end of year wrap up.
All right.